You're listening to the Vocabbett podcast, where I help students improve their vocabulary for the SAT, ACT, and life itself using my unique and research-backed story-based method. On this podcast, I'm sharing the best tips and tricks for a more enriched vocabulary and pain-free test day. Hello, and welcome to episode 42 of the Vocabbett podcast. I'm Erica Abbott, a former English and history teacher, the author of the young adult novel Ahead of Her Time, and the founder of the eponymously named vocabulary company, Vocabbett. Today, I want to teach you a trick that I have used a lot myself personally, and that I've used a lot with my students. If you are in a pinch, you don't have time to get your 8 story-based impressions, and there's not a great etymological backstory available either, here is what you do. Find a way to connect your new word to a word you already know. This is such a weird analogy, but it's like those fish that attach themselves to sharks. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's kind of a good cheat way to speed up the process and bypass some of the boredom and danger you might otherwise encounter. This trick doesn't work for every word. It can definitely be overused. The shark might turn around and eat you, but it can definitely be helpful in certain circumstances. Let's use the word ameliorate as an example. It means to make something better. I've maybe used it once or twice on the podcast. I'm honestly not even sure. You definitely don't have 8 impressions from me yet, at least. Etymologically, the backstory isn't very interesting either. It comes from melior in Latin, which means to make better. And, that makes sense. The definition of ameliorate is to make something better, but it's not really a fun story. It's basically just giving you the definition again. So if you find yourself in this position, you don't have time to get the 8 story-based impressions, the etymology isn't really interesting, here is your workaround. Find an English word that you already know, that you have your 8 impressions for, that maybe hopefully you have way more than 8 impressions for, and connect the word to that. This connection can be totally random. It doesn't have to be etymology-based or super fancy or anything like that. When I first learned the word ameliorate in Mr. Crow's 10th grade English class, I decided that ameliorate sounds like the name Amelia. And I was like, okay, ameliorate means to make something better. Okay, yeah, Amelia. Amelia makes everything better. I personally, of course, was thinking about Amelia Peabody. If you have not yet read the Amelia Peabody series by Elizabeth Peters, ameliorate your life and go get it. I'm going to read you a little passage from Crocodile on the Sandbank, the first book in the series, and I'm totally just sneaking in 8 impressions right now. But Amelia is going to ameliorate the life of a young woman who is down on her luck. They're in Italy in the late 1800s. The British are traveling all over the place at this point. Amelia is traveling too. She's on her way to Egypt. But as she's having tea in Italy, there is a disturbance nearby. An English woman has fainted, maybe died, on the street, and a crowd has gathered around her, but no one is helping. I'm just going to read you the passage from here. I rose to my feet, therefore, and after brushing off my bustle, I approached the group. My parasol proved useful in passing through it. I had to apply the tip quite sharply to the backs of several gentlemen before they would move. Eventually, I penetrated to the center of the circle. As I had surmised, no one was behaving with sense or compassion. Indeed, several of the ladies were pulling their escorts away, with comments about infection and criticism of the fallen lady's probable character. She was so pitiful as she lay there on the cold, damp ground that only a heart of stone could have been unmoved. There are many hearts of that composition, however. I sat down upon the ground and lifted the girl's head onto my knee. I regretted very much that I had not worn a cloak or mantle. However, that was easily remedied. Your coat, sir, I said to the nearest gentleman. He was a stout, red-faced person whose extra layers of flesh should have been enough to keep him warm without the fur-lined greatcoat he wore. He carried a handsome gold-headed stick, which he had been using to poke at the fallen girl as a lecturer in a waxworks indicates the exhibits. When I addressed him, he turned from his companion, to whom he had been speaking in an undertone, and stared at me. What? He snorted. Your coat, I said impatiently. Give it to me at once. Then, as he continued to stare, his face getting redder and redder, I raised my voice. Sir, your coat, at once! I put the coat over the girl. End quote. So if you encounter a word you don't know, you don't have time to get your 8 story-based impressions, there isn't a readily available etymological story for you, just find any connection that makes sense to you. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be ameliorate, means to make things better, because Amelia Peabody makes things better. Just find something that works for you. On a different note, I am currently ameliorating the offerings at Vocabbett. I'm adding a lot of great supplementary learning resources for virtual and distance learning, homeschooling, micropods, the whole shebang. It will start rolling out on August 15th and plan on seeing more and more throughout the year. The price is going to go up when these changes occur on August 15th. So, to automatically lock in current rates, you need to sign up before then. I really hope to see all of you there.